when we hack linear to do certain things, or like see our customers hacking it to a certain way, that's always an opportunity for us to try to build a product feature or like another lens into the product to better accommodate that workflow.
Remember, the full episode is only available to our Patreon members. Hello, welcome to the DevTools-fm podcast. This is a podcast about developer tools and the people who make them. I'm Andrew, and this is my co-host, Justin.
Hey, everyone. Our guest today is Jori Lallo. Jori is one of the founders of Linear, which is an absolutely delightful issue tracking and project management software. Jori, it's a pleasure to have you on. I'm excited to talk about Linear. But before we dig into that, would you like to tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Pleasure to be here. Few words about myself. Yeah, I've been an engineer for most of my career since graduating a little over 10 years ago from school. I didn't go to CS, so kind of like more self-taught from like technology background, but always been in like computers and got into startups at the kind of like the beginning of like the I would say like the previous generation around 2007, 2008 era. Got like really interested in like the NASC and like startup like scene in San Francisco. I'm from Finland, grew up there, went to school there, was fortunate enough to end up moving into SF in 2011 to intern for a small YC startup. So that was kind of like my accidental entry point into like moving to the States and working for startups. Before that, I had a couple of my own false starts and was like in the student ecosystem in Finland, but kind of like ended up on that route and like being coding since, and like now started a couple of companies, and so like the last one is Linear. Nowadays, unfortunately, I don't code that much anymore, but I still like try to stay relevant on other means.
For sure. The sacrifice of a founder. It's like you start by coding a lot, and then slowly it gets.
Oh yeah, everyone's like, oh man, like I want to like quit my job and just like do my own thing and so on. It's like, yeah, two years rolls by and like, yeah, you're not coding anymore. So
yeah, for sure.
But you just gotta need to be okay with it. I found my peace earlier this year, so it's all good now.
Yeah, awesome. So Linear is not the first startup that you founded. How is it different from the other experiences that you've had in your previous startups?
Yeah, so I had another company called Kept. Actually, it was together with Kari, who's also one of the founders of Linear and our CEO and the design, like head of design as well. So we had a small startup around bookmarking space, actually, kind of trying to like do social bookmarking app. In 2012, we went through YC together with it. Before that, it started out as a small like weekend side project that we once put together over a weekend. It sat for a little while, like in a closet for like a year, but then we kind of like started working on it again. I think like the paths for my two companies have been like drastically different. Granted, they were like founded in a little bit like different, like in very different times. If you go like back to 2012, that's already a decade ago. So I think like startup advice overall was not as well like distributed at the time. I would say like nowadays, like advice to raise a seed round and like getting angel investment and so forth. Like the ecosystem has gone forward quite a bit, and like a lot of this information is very widely available and like distributed, and so many more people have gone through it. But at a time, it's a little bit more unknown, I would say. And also like the ecosystem overall is smaller. It's like drastically smaller. This was like time before Stripe, Airbnb, and Dropbox. They were all small companies of under 100 people roughly. But kind of like the differences, Linear never made it. So we did try a couple of years. It was basically just two of us with a couple of like people like hovering around us. We actually even like failed to raise money. It's like we ran in cockroach mode from the little money that we got through Y Combinator at the time, and is very, it's just very, very different experience. Also, like granted, like I don't think like we didn't really know like what we were doing like when it comes to like building companies, but I think like part of that was like we never really worked at like startups either. Like I did a year before that at a startup, but it was a 2-person company. So I'd never seen scale. I never seen like how to hire people, how to like grow the company as an entity, which is extremely important. And now with Linear, I think, well, kind of like long story short, like we tried like a couple of like different things. Neither of them like really panned out. But there's like a couple of like good learnings from it. Like we were like always design driven, and like we were fortunate enough to attract. It was a tool startup as well, so we were able to attract like-minded people as users for it, and like build this small community around it. And like that was something really neat. So like build stuff for people who really cared about it, but it just wasn't like really scalable. We ended up like winding everything down and joining Coinbase in 2014. They were in the same YC batch as we were when we went through YC. So it's like a natural fit from that sense, but like it's not a tool startup for sure. It's a very, very different space. But I joined them when there were roughly 20 people. I stayed there 4.5 years roughly, and that is kind of like my school on learning how to like build companies. Just kind of like just learning from like seeing from the sideline, or like being part of that roller coaster that was that company, which I felt like really lucky. And I feel like if someone's like like thinking of like starting their own company, joining a company that seems to be taking off at an early stage is the best thing that you can like do for yourself, because you kind of like get the training on like other people's dime, and hopefully like like maybe you like build wealth out of it like in the in the process, and like also like build like real like good like friendships and increase your own skills and craft. So I think like that's something like that was like the school for me to like learn how to like see very closely how to run a company. And Coinbase is a phenomenal company. I think like it's one of those like little like misunderstood companies, unfortunately. It's just you read the stuff and so on.
Yeah.
It was not like that. Like it's not a bad place. Like had like I don't know. It's like phenomenal company with really, really passionate people, extremely like diverse set of like people who really care about the space, and they're like extremely good at hiring in the early days, especially. And they always move forward as well. I think like that's like one of the things. Like often like startups, I feel like they just kind of like become stagnant, become irrelevant. Coinbase is always moving forward, and definitely like learn to how to hire well badly, how to grow well, and like see like what kind of like mistakes are being made and whatnot. A lot of like those things like what I mentioned earlier, like fundraising, like that kind of stuff, like you can read, but people don't really talk about or write about running companies, or if there's a blog post about or like a book written about some area, like no one ever really goes back and writes a second blog post of like what we actually learn, or like this doesn't work, or like what are the caveats after. So I think like a lot of like our industry also, I mean, it's a young industry. Like we've been on this for like roughly a decade in its current form. There's a lot of Kirko culting things that you just replicate because you've seen like other things replicated on top of it, and like you follow the same formula. But if you haven't seen that, like what actually happens, like what comes out of those things, it's hard to take a critical eye on it. So
yeah, for sure. That early startup experience is critical. It's also a school of hard knocks. It's like you got to be mentally prepared for the challenge, because it is a challenge. Just like those early startup experiences they're a lot of work.
Yeah, it's rough. Like it's and like you're the founder. Like everything's kind of like on you. The buck stops at you. So you can't really bitch about like things to like others. Like you just gotta roll with it and like also like manage your like own mental health and so on. It's easier if you're a little bit like older, I would say. At least like personally, like when you're in your 20s, you kind of like don't necessarily even know yourself, but you know, you grow as a person. Hopefully that makes you a better leader as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you started Linear with two co-founders. So you mentioned Kari earlier, and Tomas is another co-founder. Tomas was a staff engineer and manager at Uber for a while. So incredibly interesting dynamic between the three of you. Now that Linear has like been growing, and you know, I understand that y'all were like sort of friends before the Linear company started. How has the relationship changed between the three of you? Is like has you know it's as you said, it's like it's a challenge building a startup, and I'm just curious. It's like do y'all feel like a stronger group? You know, just curious about that.
No, that's a really good question. So I know both of them separately for over a decade at this point. I mean, like with Kari, of course, like we had like a separate company together. So I like worked with him much more closely in the past. With Thomas, I never worked with prior to Linear, but like we've been friends for a long time. And he also like moved to San Francisco around a little like after I did, but definitely like spending quite a lot of like time together. And you know, like once we were like at our separate like or like employers, like exchanging a lot of like horror stories and so on. Like Thomas is one of those. He's a extremely unique engineer. Like he's one of the, you know, he's the like engineer's engineer. He can like pick up anything and like build it to like an extreme level. He cares a lot about like detail, product, but kind of like. And at Uber, they were building out a lot of the frameworks that build out the mobile applications and later on like other things as well. So he comes a little bit more from that, I wouldn't say like systems engineering point of view, but like, you know, building out tools to build tools. So he has like a very different perspective versus to myself and Kari, for example. It's been definitely, you know, like when you work together, or when you start working together and you haven't worked together, you kind of like need to figure that out. We were relatively, how would I say, pragmatic about that. Like when we got started, so we didn't just like quit our jobs and start working on Linear. Like we worked on it over the weekends, and we were like talking about it for probably like a year before we even incorporated or did anything like too official for it. So definitely like had this like idea brewing, or like that we want to like do something about the space and like what would it look like, instead of just like, oh, I don't like also like a side note, a lot of people want to start a company. That was not our goal. Like we just like, you know, we want to like build a product, like not, it's like, you know, and start from that angle. I think like so overall, like often like much more healthier. In our case, it was also easier because it's kind of like a known product space, and like we kind of like knew like we want to do this, and like there's probably like some interest, like there's going to be some interest, like these tools, someone like existed in one form or another for several decades at this point. But when we went eventually full time on Linear, we did not hire anyone for the first year or so. I think we incorporated like company around, was it like February, and our first employee, who was like a friend from Coinbase, joined us in December, and we were just like very focused, like let's just, you know, like get together, like let's just start building and make something that we can use first, and like learn how to like we work together before we start like adding people into the mix, because that complicates things. Like people are complicated. So that's something like we were like very intentional about, but of course like the relationship has grown quite a lot, and I think like we have like very healthy and also complementary skill set plus we help each others and we care about different things. But as long as you speak the same language, that helps. We're also, well, on the language front, we're all Finns, so that's why I knew both of them. Although we all lived in San Francisco for a decade or so.
I think one of the interesting things about Linear is, it's that we want to build a product. It's not about building a business, it's about building a product. And I think it shows through a lot in how y'all actually do development. The other thing is that the founding team was a team that had all the skills to build the product from the very beginning. You had design expertise, you had product engineering expertise, you had system development expertise. And that's just it feels unique to me to have a well-rounded team like that from the very get-go, which gave you a lot of leeway, I think, to just churn amongst yourself and to get some product foundations right and everything. Anyway, that's really interesting.
We've also had a little bit of work at bigger companies. We know how those work. We work at startups. Tuomas, he's been around the block for a long time, since the .com era. So that as well. But it's just definitely, always we're builders and we love building things.
So we've talked a little bit about Linear, but we haven't really addressed what Linear is. So for our audience that might not know what Linear is, what is it and how does it improve upon other similar tools?
Yeah, we're in the simplest term, issue tracker. Maybe it has it's the term itself is maybe not the best descriptor, but I think it's something that everyone knows what it means on some level. But it's essentially a tool where you can track your work, track feature requests, track bugs, collaborate with your peers, do project management, build products. We always been very focused on teams and companies building products. That's kind of our foundation for it. We're not a general purpose tool. We're there for developers, engineers, PMs, everyone, kind of helping you build better products. Some of the, of course, we come from design background, so we try to make everything well designed, and we care about speed a lot. That was one of the core tenets for us. So make the app extremely fast and snappy from the get-go. We put a lot of engineering investment into that from very start, instead of trying to first build something and then make it fast later. But we kind of all know how that often goes. But part of that was also that we weren't trying to build something completely new. We tried to build a better product that of those products existed before. So in that way, I would say Linear is, we kind of there's benefits to that. There's pros and cons, I would say. So the pros are that kind of the business model, the industry is somewhat defined, and we know that there's going to be customers for this if we do it right. Every engineering team or product team uses a tool like this at some point of their journey. Some maybe start later, some start earlier. But then the con is that the kind of the MVP is somewhat more people have more expectations. So I think in relation to that, we also we were comfortable working for a year before hiring anyone. We pushed back on fundraising and these kind of things, because we just knew that we need to get the foundation correct. And in many ways, 4 years later or 3-4 years later, we're still working on that foundation. It's just the goalpost just moves over time. At first, we're very focused on let's build something that we can use, and maybe other teams of 2 to 5 to 10 people can use. Your requirements are much more different than a company of several hundred people. So I would say overall, over time, I think like focus is one of our core tenets as well. When, like speed, focus, just not like trying to like pick your battles and like do one thing, like do that thing well, and like understand like what you're also like trying to do instead of like trying to build everything and like hope like someone will like stick with it. That's kind of like not something like we're up for. So.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So one of the big differences between Linear and other products is that it has a local first approach where it does a lot of things locally in the app before like communicating with the back end. Why was this such an important baseline feature for you guys to get in? And how did you do it, if you can comment on that?
So, yeah, optimistic updates. I don't like that's the story. Local first and offline readiness are someone. They're almost like local first, like for sure. But like offline readiness, for example, is like a byproduct of like how we build Linear, and then we're able to like plug that in afterwards. So the goal is to like build something that's really, really snappy. And if you see a spinner or like a loader after your every interaction, like it's like if that's your foundation, like it's extremely hard to like change. So we still like build out the foundation from the get-go to do updates locally first, and then like just communicate them, distribute them like behind the scenes. Of course, some might fail, but like most often they don't. Often the question is like, okay, like how do you do conflict resolution? Well, the short answer, or like simple answer, is like we kind of like don't have to that often. So in a tool like Linear, most changes are addition on something that's like already happened. We're not a Notion or Google Docs. You don't edit the same text block. Of course, you can edit like the same issue description at the same time, but the reality is that like that rarely ever happens. So hopefully we can like solve that at some point. But right now, the last update wins. So how it like technically happens is a little bit like similar to, for example, like how Dropbox builds their desktop application. Is that when you first log into Linear, you get a larger dump, what we call a bootstrap, of kind of like all of your issues and like a lot of like teams and users and that information. We load that first in memory, then persist in IndexedDB in the background. If you use the product, that's the caching indicator that like pops up after you're logged in. And after that, we just do Delta syncs or like Delta packages distributed through WebSockets, and those get applied on the local copy of the store that you use. So we maintain a copy of the kind of the whole like the database in memory, and then persisting in IndexedDB. We first update everything into that, show everything in the client, then send those over. If you get something like those like Delta packages over the wire, they select get applied, like the UI reacts to those. We use a little bit like it's a React application, React with TypeScript. We use Mobex under the hood to do all the updating, but so like the developer experience for this is it's different from a lot of like applications where you have to like we do all the heavy lifting for you. We do like the mutations and queries, and like we don't do queries, but like we do mutations. So whenever you like mutate something, we auto-generate GraphQL mutations out of those and like send those to the server, which then creates the Delta packages for other clients. But all of that is abstracted from us like engineers at Linear. So we basically only interact with the store that's the application state. And you read from it, UI updates, you change things to it, mutations are created in the background. So while it was like, it's an engineering feat. Tuomas actually has a YouTube video about it. I can share it after the fact, but allows us to move faster while putting this upfront investment in place. It's not like easy system. That's why we have Tuomas and a couple of other engineers working on it. Nowadays, more or less full time as well. Like scaling this is like we knew like at first like our customers were relatively small. They don't have that much data, so we can just read all of their information into the client. As we grow, like we know that like that's not going to work out anymore. So then we started like chipping off and like doing other more unique things on top of it to help it scale. So that's it's an ongoing thing as well. But it's kind of like at first, we served like the small startups. Now we serve companies like growth stage companies of Vercel, Retool, like several hundred engineers. And then Cash App is also using us, and they're I don't remember like how big they are, but it's a sizable engineering organization. So we've been able to like scale Linear as a product, both like from the product perspective, but also from the kind of like the technical foundation perspective. And that's in the end like our goal. Like we want Linear to be the one tool that you use. Like if you're a small startup, like pick up using it, like don't think about it, and it should get you throughout your like scale, IPO and beyond. So.
I really love this. So it's like this really complex technical architecture that's required, but the thing that you're going for, the thing that you're pushing for is optimistic updates. I want to do an action and feel like it instantly completed. And it's like, it's a difference between a performance first company and a company who thinks about performance after the fact, because architecting a system or introducing that type of architecture post shipping a product is a non-trivial endeavor. And it would have taken y'all a long time to get to that point. So it's like, I don't know. That's really cool to hear about.
And yeah, it's hard. Luckily, nowadays, there's starting to be some technical solutions for this. For example, Replicache, and I'm sure you know like a bunch of like a bunch of others. When we started 4 years ago, like, there's nothing. CouchDB, CouchDB and Firebase, but they didn't work for a kind of like multi-tenant team tool. They work really well if you're just like one user who switches between like different applications and your state follows you, your settings follow you. But for a tool like Linear, like nothing existed, so we kind of like had to like do the investment. And Tuomas really went to town with it, and I'm glad he did. I don't personally like have the engineering like capabilities like pull that off, but I'm really fortunate to be working with him. And yeah, it's like one of the like the defining things of Linear. It's like the speed and the snappiness. We basically don't have almost like there's a couple of spinners and like loading states in the application, but you can use the product and like try to find them yourself. Tell where they are.
Yeah, working on a small team to solve a product like this is an interesting like constraint. So I work at Oxide. Oxide's building a massive product and has our engineering team's like 65 people or something, and pretty much everybody's engineers. It's one of those things where it makes you focus on only the things that's important and like really keeps you focused on the product. And I think a lot of things that companies face as they scale is you lose a cohesive product vision, right? Because it's like hard to get, 200 engineers or 300 engineers on the same page about like what you're trying to do, what you're trying to build, and how you want to approach customers. And so many people get so far from the customers that it's like, you lose a lot of this.
Yeah, maybe you never even talk to the customer, or maybe you never even like actually used your own product, which is, it's a reality in probably a lot of like our industry. Unfortunately, like, of course, like those products, like those services need to be built. I think we're fortunate enough that we're building a tool that we use to build the tool. So we live in the tool all day long, and that's just immensely like helpful for us. And everyone's like pretty close to like customers, and that kind of like customer closeness is also something that we try to build out from day one. Like change logs is luckily now it's been fascinating to see like a lot of like startups nowadays do change logs and like push out these like more incremental like updates and like whereas like back in the day it used to be like you just like have that like TechCrunch launch window and you like build everything towards it and like then you move on. But now at least for us it's like much more like incremental things. It's not about like ego. It's not about your like next promotion or like these kind of things, which is also like if you get like really far away from like the customer, you start, you kind of like lose like track a little bit of like what you're trying to build as a team or as a company, and you like start thinking a little bit more of yourself and what are your goals. Of course, there's like room for that. Like there should you should be like looking after yourself and everything. But I'm just saying that like in a larger company, that's much more of a like can be a reality that happens when you can really like make meaningful change, or like you're not fulfilled. So then you're mostly like optimizing for, okay, like how do I get a like really good performance review? So it's like that's so for us it's like, yeah, let's just talk to users and like build stuff that we're proud of and the team can be proud of. And I don't know, it's a lot of like fun doing it, and we're in very fortunate to be to like build a tool for ourselves.
Yeah, dog fooding your product is like one of the best things that you can do. It's just like if you're building a code library and you're not using it, you're probably not experiencing the problems that your users are facing. I work at Descript, and this podcast is literally us dog fooding the Descript product, so I can be closer to it. So
I didn't know that. And like you've been linear users for like really really long time at this point.
Yeah. We are heavy linear users.
I know, like the other Andrew. He's very active on giving feedback, which we really appreciate. So
yeah. Oh, he's active on giving feedback to my code too.
So I want to talk a little bit more about Linear, the company, and we've covered a lot of this in different ways. And one of the things you talked about earlier is like change logs, and something that struck me very early in Linear's life is that like a change log was a part of the is part of the product development lifecycle, was a part of the like image of the company. It was like a part of the product. And it made me reflect on when I first like stumbled across Stripe's docs, or like went to Stripe's docs for the first time, and they treat their docs as a part of the product, right? That high quality bar. And it was really interesting to see that same high quality bar, like clear design, unified voice, like brought to this like company changelog. And then you've got this idea of a public changelog rolled into what you're calling the linear method, which is a lot of high level concepts. Can you talk about that a little bit, like the linear method and where that came from and how it sort of plays into how y'all think about product development?
Yeah. I think when you look at linear, it's very easy to look it as a product. But I think for me and like for us, it's like kind of like it's much more beyond that. When we talk about building out the company and like doing stuff inside the company, it's not like I think like I aspire to like build linear on the same standards across whatever is like something on the engineering or design to like all the other functions at the company. So like when it comes to recruiting or like marketing or like customer support and so on, like we try to like take the same level of care and like same approach across. Just like trying to like build focus, like try to do something like really high quality, build out like something like people care about. and like feel good about, because all of these things, I think like people often are very, very laser focused on just the product, because that's kind of like they see the company as being. But then you have like your recruiting people, like your recruiters are like the first person, like, or like the first contact like many people have with the company. So that should, in my mind, like our mind, like have the similar level of like care or like the feeling when you interact with them. And it's kind of like, you know, like the priorities, I think we try to like build out Linear to be much more, you know, like equitable and like more like inclusive from all of these like functions, having like same hiring bar across functions. We try to like give people like fair offers and equity packages and so on when it comes to like compensation, for example. I know like in some companies, like engineers are gods, like, and everyone else kind of doesn't necessarily like matter. It's really bizarre because like everyone in the company like should be like really like doing the things like build, like the company is the people. So if you have like this like group of prima donnas somewhere and like they're really highly valued and like everyone else is not, like it's I don't know, it's kind of like messed up and like from the old world of thinking a little bit. Maybe that's a little like too ranty, but but I really try to like think like Linear as something like I can only be proud of as a company, that like where I want to work really a long time. And we're trying to like build everything like very sustainable like fashion as well. Like we know that like this is not going to be a, you know, one night wonder. It's not going to like take off tomorrow and like be the tool used by all the like large companies. It's going to take a long time, and we're so like trying to build a tool that we want to use ourselves, but also like build out all the other things in the way that like we want to, you know, interact as well. I think like marketing is something like a dirty word, because I think like there's a lot of like not that interesting like things happening necessarily. Some companies are doing really well. I think like as you mentioned Stripe, their home pages or like page designs were kind of like the quintessential marketing tool that no one probably like outside like saw as marketing, but of course like is recruiting, but then it's also like just building out awareness of Stripe. For us, change logs, I would say, is unintentionally, it was never designed to be that, but it like morphed into that. Like we started doing change logs before we even released the product publicly. Because we just like when like it was something for us to hold ourselves accountable on shipping, putting stuff out there, like keeping this like continuous movement around us. So we just like started like doing a weekly change log. We commit to like doing it and like have stuff there. You feel a little like embarrassed if you don't have anything meaningful, or if you put something out there and like it's no one cares about it, or you know, like you do something only for you but like not for the others. So it's like a really good forcing function. So that's how it started, but then it morphed into more of this like a cultural thing for us as well. And out of that, linear method it's just like, I think like our industry, like we've been building out products for a long time, and there's been like definitely like several like generations. Like Agile Manifesto came out way back in the day, and people wrote books about it and like followed the advice. And but it's I would say, you know, it's not super relevant, or like there's the key tenets of it like are relevant, but maybe how some of the stuff was put into products is not as relevant anymore for like modern companies. What's an epic, a sprint, all these like interesting like words you keep on using. It's like, no, it's like it's a project, or like, well, sprint kind of like, well, still it makes more sense. We like to call them cycles, and instead of like having a burn down chart that goes down, we have it like up, because it's much more motivating to like make progress and like, you know, like get yourself like to the goal post. It's like those like small things that, and like hopefully like it makes sense also like outside the people who are in this or developers who use these tools in the past. Like it should be like you come as a designer or come as a customer experience agent into the tool. Like it should all make sense to you. So I mean, we try to like build Linear to be this approachable thing that's it's not a luxury product. It's like should be a quality product for everyone to use and everyone to enjoy, and like get out of your way to build better things, build better products. So linear method is something that we wanted to start codifying some of our thinking as it's part our beliefs and experience put into paper. What we've seen at these high growth companies like doing products really well. Like we worked at, like the founding team worked at Coinbase, Airbnb, and Uber, for example. Most of our employees we have like many people from Slack, Facebook, like you name a company, but like everyone like brings in this like experience, and we know that like people don't run the agile like playbook at these companies. It's like everything is like a little like it's much more like this iterative approach of building products. And I think like what we try to like then also like people come to us nowadays to like ask like, how did you build Linear to be like at this quality bar? Like how can we replicate that? So a lot of it is like now people naturally come to us to ask these questions, and it should not be like everyone's like job or like highest priority, like trying to figure out their product development process from scratch. Like there's certain things that work, certain things that don't. We just try to like put on paper some of the best practices that we found that worked for us and like the companies where we worked, and things that we believe that are like valuable for guiding people to the right direction, and maybe avoiding some common traps. Some people call it like to be a little bit opinionated, like we have a little bit like opinionation in the product, but in the end, we try to like build a little bit like maybe like guide people towards the right direction. So it's like here's small set of tools, both principles and a tool that you can like take, start building, like don't reinvent the wheel. Like this should work for you. And once you learn, then apply your learnings and like modify things. Like it should not be restrictive, but it should just be helping you to focus like on what's important. And on the product side, what we often try to do a little bit is to help people avoid hurting themselves. It's like people have good intentions, but you might not always think about the broader consequences. Like when you do something, I think like everyone has probably used one of these products where there's a lot of like required fields or similar things, a lot of like codified process, which it had there's a reason why that was configured in. It was like something was breaking and someone was like, we need to like codify this so like people won't make this mistake. And then everyone kind of like has to live with it because there's this one thing that happened. Like real world is like, there's one lawsuit that like ruins it for everyone. So, we try to like avoid, like by design, avoid some of these restrictions in the product that you can't really like necessarily like hurt yourself too much by not letting you do certain things. But often it can be also a little like hard to communicate it to people. But we're probably okay saying no to things or like deferring until we learn more about it and like can build our own thinking around it. And then, some things like lead into linear method and we can, put them in the product, put them in writing, share it. As I said like earlier, I think like a lot of like our industry grew really fast over the past decade. People are sort of like, they're repeating the same playbook without always like necessarily understanding what they're doing. And I think what we try to do when we build the product, when we build the companies, just think from first principles, like what do we want to like see? What do we see in like done wrong. For example, like how we do our marketing is like, I wouldn't call it marketing, but it's stuff that like I just like things that we want to see as content, which is also a little like, I don't know, weird word to me, but you know, certain high quality things that like we enjoy seeing, and things that, you know, you don't have to like do stuff that you don't enjoy seeing. Like you can be a little bit more opinionated about it.
Yeah, I think it's cool how you guys feature the method so prominently on your website. You're like, here's the wheel, here's how we think you should use the wheel, but feel free to use the wheel however you want to. Okay, so moving into our last question for the episode. In each episode, we usually ask like a future-facing question to like summarize the space. So for Linear, what are you guys building towards? What do you think Linear might look like in 5 years? And more generally, what do you think like the future of project management is?
Yeah. So although we've been like building Linear for several years at this point, I consider like things to be like very early stage for us. I think like we like such scratched the surface, gotten like some of the like the key building blocks in place, and like we're starting like approach the place where we can really start building on top of them.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. Remember, the full episode is only available to our Patreon members. Thanks for listening.